Hello, I'm Ken Robinson, and I'm really pleased to have been asked to say a few words at the beginning of these conversations at the book fair. Firstly, I want to say how thrilled I am that my latest book, Creative Schools, is being published in Ukraine. I want to thank the publishers for their investment and their confidence in the success of the book. And of course also I want to thank the wonderful translators, and particularly Hannah, who've done such a tremendous job in making the book available. I'm trusting that it's a great translation, and I'm absolutely sure it will be. And I hope you'll enjoy the book as well. It's the result of quite a long experience and career of mine in education, and I'm urging in the book for us to think differently about how, and to some degree why, we invest so much in our education systems and how we really go about educating our children for the present and for the future. So at the beginning of your conversations, let me just say a few words to highlight a number of the key themes in the book in a way that I hope will be helpful and illuminating if you haven't had time to look at it yet. Education is one of the largest investments that any culture, any country makes in its own future. And it is an investment. It's not just a cost. It's the process through which we aim to cultivate the talents and the skills and the resources that each succeeding generation needs to make its way in the world and to contribute to the growth and development of its communities. A lot of our education systems were designed for the challenges of previous eras, and that's the problem as I see it. Most education systems in the world currently are undergoing some process of reform, and I know this is true in Ukraine. In many systems, though, the reforms are focused on trying to improve the system as it is, rather than looking at ways in which it could be transformed into something different and something I believe that it should become. Many countries are reforming education through a process of testing, through more and more standardization and central control. And one of the results of that has been that teacher morale has fallen, student achievement hasn't risen overall in a way that I think is conducive to the health and success of them or their school systems. And very often the school curriculum has become very narrowed. But there are bigger issues here at stake. You see, what really runs through the heart of creative schools are three main propositions. One of them is that we are living through times of immense and radical global change. These changes are fundamental and therefore to a degree revolutionary. And I don't mean that in some metaphorical way, I mean it literally. There are three big forces of change here. One of them is the rate of technological innovation, which has transformed the world fundamentally, particularly in the past 15, 20 years. The second is the growth of world populations and the way in which they're shifting. We are now members of a population on Earth of human beings which numbers 7.5 billion people almost, the largest generation in the history of humanity. And the third is the tremendous strains that are resulting from all of that on our political systems and also on our natural systems. So these are generally times of tumultuous and unpredictable change. The second proposition is that if we're to meet this change, education is in the front line. And we need, as we think about education, to fundamentally review how we think of talent, intelligence and ability. Most of our systems are based on a very narrow view of intelligence and talent, and I think that's been to the great detriment of our children and of our communities. You see, to me, human resources are like the Earth's natural resources. They're very diverse, but we need to uncover them, we need to discover them, and we need to refine them. And if we build systems of education based on a narrow view of intelligence and talent, we end up ignoring and marginalizing the greater part of the talents that many children actually have. And the third theme that runs through the book, therefore, is that we have to do things differently. Our old systems aren't fit for this purpose. Trying to improve them and leave them as they are fundamentally is a little like trying to improve the steam engine and make it better when what we actually need is a warp engine. So the book is arguing for fundamental change, and also not just arguing for it, but illustrating what it looks like and how it's working in different countries and in different schools. and in different school systems. But what it all relates to is the need to be clear about why we're doing all this in the first place. What is education for, fundamentally? Well, as I see it, there are sort of two main focuses, or should be, in education. The first is to help young people, indeed all of us, understand the world around us. Clearly that's vitally important, and it has big implications for the curriculum, what should be in the curriculum and why. But there's another focus for education which is equally important, which is to help people understand the world within them. The world that exists only because they exist, the world of their feelings, their personal perceptions, their sensibilities, and their own view of the world that they are part of and how they can transact with the world around them. And many of the problems we face in schools arise from the neglect of that inner world. But more broadly, education has four big roles. And I hope these might form part of your conversation over the next few days and continuing into the future as you look at the future of the system in Ukraine itself. These aren't in any particular order, but they're crucially important in determining the future character of education. The four roles, firstly, let's begin with the economic role. Education, of course, has very important economic roles. It would be strange to suggest otherwise. What we expect from our education systems is that they will help our children develop the talents, the skills, the aptitudes, the competencies, and the knowledge they will need to become economically engaged, productive, and independent. So there's a big question here. What sort of skills and knowledge now do they need to participate in and contribute to economic growth and development in this area of human history, in the 21st century rather than the 19th century? The second big role of education is social. We expect education to enable our kids to live with other people, to collaborate, to be good citizens, and to take part in the process of community development, and to be responsible members of their communities and of their countries. So what sort of skills they need to do that, and what kind of education system is best suited not just to tell them about these roles, but to help them practice them, live them, and understand them. The third big role of education is cultural, by which I mean the history, the traditions, the ways of life, the beliefs and value systems that characterize our different communities. Education clearly has a role to help children understand the cultures they're part of, but also as the world it develops, grows and becomes more complex, many of the challenges we face are not only economic, they're not only environmental, they are deeply cultural. Many of the huge conflicts between different human communities arise out of the different cultural perspectives that drive their ways of life. So education has a big role too, to help us understand and mediate our understanding of other people's cultures as well as of our own. And the fourth role is personal. And this to me is at the heart of it, because in the end education is a personal matter. We're dealing with human beings, we're dealing with people who are developing quickly, whose capacities are enormous, but whose capacities may or may not develop according to opportunities and how we nurture them. That's why I say human resources are like there's natural resources. They're often buried deep, we have to discover them, and then we have to not just discover them, but refine them and cultivate them. And that's a big part of education. I wrote a book several years ago called The Element, How Finding Your Passion Changes Everything, which is about the nature of human talent and the conditions under which it will flourish, and that's also part of the conversation in creative schools. I believe we need to shift from processes of education which are highly standardized to those which are more personalized to individual students' talents and more customized to their circumstances, to their communities. Well, I say it's not just a theory. I've tried to set all these things out in some detail in the book and to give lots of examples of how it works. But they do have implications for how schools are organized, for the curriculum, for how we think about teaching and the roles of teachers, for how we think about assessment, for partnerships between schools and other organizations, cultural and economic organizations, and also for continuity from the earliest days of education through to the later days in higher education and lifelong learning. Well, these are important issues, I think, for every country now, for every national system, and they're important for our international systems too. These are generally global challenges that we all face. And I do believe that every country will find its own solutions and will have to, but they have to be part of a global perspective. And I hope you'll find too that that's a theme that runs through creative schools. So again, thank you very much to the publishers and the translators for making Creative Schools available in Ukraine. Thank you for taking time to discuss the book as part of your larger conversations in Ukraine about the development of the national education system. And I send you my very best wishes for the conversations of the next few days and in the longer term. I think it's very important, and I'm delighted to have made some contribution to it. Thank you.